Have you wandered into a room before and wondered, what on earth am I doing in here? I came in here for a reason and I can't think about what I'm doing here. And perhaps you've closed your eyes or you've taken the steps before you got into the room, or maybe several steps back before the aha moment of, I know why I needed to go into that room. I know the reason that I was there. You relied on memory, you relied on information about where you were in space and what you were doing before, but essentially it's this rich, detailed memory. You're drawing on the power of the hippocampus, and it is one of the key areas affected by severe memory loss for conditions like Alzheimer's disease. If you were to squint with one eye and look at the hippocampus, you would perhaps describe it like a seahorse, and yes, that's where it draws its name from in Greek, representing sea and monster, or seahorse. Yep, go figure. It has a crucial role, as I've mentioned, around consolidating memory, and it's also involved in human learning and spatial memory, and helps you navigate memory, really. In 2019, the team of Marino Jimenez and her associates ended the raging debate this year about whether the adult brain could grow new neurons. It was put to bed. In a short statement and very loud, it was clear that yes, the brain has this wonderful ability to grow new neurons throughout life, and the hippocampus has that gorgeous phenomenon of being able to do this. What we've seen in the first decade of life through to the ninth decade of life was this opportunity, this garden bed of growth around these baby neurons wanting to mature. For conditions like Alzheimer's disease, if there is a rapid drop-off of neurogenesis, this growth, this adult hippocampal neurogenesis. Yep, a tongue twister at the best of times, but meaning that your hippocampus and the neurons within that garden bed area have this capacity to grow. But that growth drops off dramatically with conditions like Alzheimer's. And guys, you've heard it before on this show, that prevention is where it's at, because there is no cure. So if we want to take seriously about how we can prevent avoidable memory loss, then let's start to understand the keys for neurogenesis.
G'day, this is David Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, brought to you by memoryhealthmadeeasy.com. Easy to remember, isn't it?
So what are they? Well, both mental and physical exercises can modify this process by increasing the number of new cells that mature into functional neurons. So basically, we've got this garden bed of young baby neurons, immature neurons, ready to go. The fascinating thing is that physical exercise and mental exercise appear to influence the process a little bit differently. Specifically, exercise or physical activity, aerobic exercise, that which raises our heart rate, it appears to be associated with greatly increasing the number of new neurons that are produced in the hippocampus. In contrast, mental training, cognitive exercises via skill learning increases the numbers of these neurons which survive beyond the immature state. They go on to maturity. And this is about ensuring, and what was particularly important about making that happen was having clear goals and being challenging. So that brings me to today's guest. Matt Rutley is a natural movement specialist. Here in Australia, he is a bush skills instructor and the owner and head coach of Stage 6 Health and Fitness here in Nunda, Australia. He's one of the leading experts on how to move your body the way it was designed to move. He takes a rich biological evolutionary perspective of how we should be nurturing our body. He's worked with sporting teams, professionals and Olympic athletes, and his client ages range from 5 through to people in their late 80s. His main goal is around how to bring about change in a way we view health and fitness, the way we understand our brains and bodies, and helping people to empower them to be more playful and explorative in their health journey. Today's conversation we really lift the covers about how we can squeeze the juice out of physical exercise by combining the mental cognitive aspects to it so that you can leverage as much as possible out of neurogenesis, about putting things, I guess, in place to leverage the opportunity that your body and brain has in place already, about growing baby neurons and maturing them so that you've got a rich and dense hippocampus that can be resilient to change, and improving that cognitive reserve that I've mentioned before in previous podcasts. So join me in today's conversation with Matt Rutley and about how to create and be formidable for life. Here we go.
This is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, the show where you learn practical tips and experts share advice on what you can do to boost your brain span to match your lifespan. Now to the host of the show, David Norris.
Thank you very much for joining me on the Memory Health Made Easy podcast.
Yes, thank you very much for the invite.
We finally got there.
Yeah, we finally got there, but I always enjoy an opportunity to geek out on this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
I think it was your wife that said to me, Dave, you are aware, aren't you, that you're asking my husband to come along and speak. He has no problems doing this.
Yeah. So no, we'll see. Hopefully we can keep this to around about an hour, but it might turn into a long form, multiple episode series.
Yeah.
Might have to cut it down, but no, we'll go. We'll try.
Thanks so much, mate. I appreciate you taking the time to come and have a conversation with me about how movement, physical exercise, how interacting with our world through, whilst we would see it physically, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And what's encouraging is that there is a real state of emerging and confirming evidence around the role of physical activity in our brain health.
Yeah.
And often spoken about as in terms of being neuroprotective. It protects our brain, it protects our cognitive performance, our cognitive fitness.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's doing a whole host of other things as well. I think that's a really broad statement that we can dive into today, but I guess for folk that are listening and watching us, where did you come at this and how did you come to get into understanding the critical role of functional movement, exercise, participating well in life?
Yeah, well, so it was largely on an autopilot sort of setting that I didn't realize the journey I was on until sort of there was some real sort of awakenings. Again, it happened very organically, but so I mean, I grew up on a farm in the bush, very physical. Yeah, I was always encouraged to play lots of sport, but also to apply myself in a lot of broad areas, academically, artistically. And so that not only happened because, I guess, growing up on a farm, you have to be very resourceful. And, we were, Dad used to joke that the only reason you have kids is so you've got someone to do the jobs you can't pay somebody else to do. But so there was a lot of physical problem solving. There was a lot of physical work. There was a lot of things that involved very natural movement aptitudes like climbing, crawling, jumping, carrying, lifting, throwing, all that kind of stuff. But there was also a lot of things like teamwork and sort of having to think your way around something and having to adapt if you didn't have the right fitting. Like I was watching my dad, like as he was doing, plumbing and things, if he didn't have the right fitting, he had to change it and he had to adapt it and solve the problems as he went. And so there was that aspect, but then there was also the aspect that both my parents were very encouraging of me to be broad and well-rounded. And when I moved away from home, I started to sort of come across people, particularly in athletic endeavors, where, being a tall, lanky bloke, I inevitably sort of went through the whole, I need to put on some size, I need to get bigger kind of thing. But that was really my first, I guess, foray into physical training. And a lot of it didn't make sense to me because I thought, well, why do it that way? Like, why split it down into back day, chest day, leg day? It didn't make sense to me because I was used to using my body in as a sort of a unit, as an entire organism. But so I went into it with that kind of like, oh, well, if this is what you need to do to get bigger, then I'll but it just never resonated. It never made sense to me. And then the longer I sort of got exposed to that world the more I realized that it was actually a really backward, reverse engineered way of trying to get something that I already had. And that was a broad physical competence. And so a lot of people were trying to look as though they were very physically competent and confident, but they were spending all their time working on what you could see in the mirror rather than actual skill development. And so yeah, I found a lot of the guys that I would sort of look to and go, I wish I had that kind of physique. They were then, saying to me, like, oh, they were amazed at the things that I could do. I thought, well, why am I trying to look like them if they're wanting to move like me? Like, why does that make any sense? And so I ended up sort of deciding I guess it all sort of happened. I guess it came to a head when I was in America. I was over there playing rugby union, and the guys, and so it was Division 1, like sort of top tier rugby in America. And so a lot of the guys I was playing rugby with were college football dropouts. And so a lot of them had been on lifting programs since they were 12. A lot of them had been, taking various supplements since they were teenage boys. And so you could stand them next to the All Blacks or the Wallabies and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference physically. And they were incredible athletes, but they weren't at all well-rounded, even on the rugby field, let alone sort of away from the rugby field. And I remember there was a guy who was a very formidable winger, and he played for the Eagles, so the national squad. I found out in a roundabout way, he didn't know how to use a rake. He didn't know what a rake, like I handed him a rake one day. He said, how do I use it? And that seemed so completely foreign to me that even if he hadn't used one, how could he be that physically sort of disconnected that he couldn't look at it and figure out how to solve that problem? Like, what does it look like it's used for? And so that led me to then go, well, I want to open a gym that basically concentrates on like farm boy fitness. It gives people an opportunity to do the things that I had the luxury of doing as a child when I was growing up. And so I thought, well, that's because I credited that with why I was so adaptable and so well-rounded. But then I guess that led me down the rabbit hole of really trying to understand why, and always asking why, and then realizing that basically people's whole approach to physical fitness and overall health is really backwards and arse about. And so, yeah, I started to then sort of do a lot more research and a lot more learning and things on the human organism and why things work the way they work. And that then sort of led me to really understand the way we approach things is very compartmentalized. And if we were to take a bird's eye view of the whole situation, and it doesn't matter what starting point you go from, if you just keep questioning, well, why would that be? Like, what's the evolutionary benefit of that? Like, where does that come from? And the more you dive into it, the more you sort of realize that there is so much that, physical well-being and mental well-being are the same thing. You can't separate the two. You can't compartmentalize it. You can't go to a gym. If you're going to a gym and trying to lose weight, for example, well, 80% of weight loss is what you eat, so you shouldn't be going to a gym to lose weight. Like it's and we've got these really bizarrely wrong ideas about what health and fitness even is, or let alone how it should be approached.
And I think that's a really important point to raise around that. We've got this disconnect around health, a pursuit of an outcome,
yes,
that I have a healthy body, but then that might be framed in bigger biceps, stronger legs, ability to perform X sport.
Yes.
And yet, when we view our engagement in that, it then sort of sets us up on a trajectory around our life and looking at the portability of those exercises and activities to allow us to be a well-rounded human to engage in the diversity of movement that we're thrown at. Coming back to a point you made earlier around some of the guys and the questioning around, chest day and leg days. And for folk that are listening to that, that's a very gym-orientated view of activity, of exercise.
It's the bodybuilding split.
So one day a guy or a lady would turn up and they would do arms or upper body, and then they would do legs, on a separate day, and the whole rest cycle. And there's clearly evidence about that for gains, for strength or size, if they're the goals. And that comes back to, I think, a really key point is, what is the goal? And I guess the premise of the show of Memory Health Made Easy is to give people the ingredients to navigate life, so that they are living a life well, productive in a sense that they are able to engage in habits, routines, or activities that are without restrictions, be it mentally or physically. Because we know that once we start to reduce our exposures, there is a change in our body and in our brain. There is an adaptation where we are becoming less flexible, less resilient to meet the diverse demands of our environment. The classic one that I could probably point out is thinking of some of my clients that when I get involved with their work or where they're at in life, it's commonly, I cannot do X. I need somebody to assist me with Y. And I feel that we've left a lot of that opportunity to affect that too late. So I'm not to say that if we're experiencing these changes in our life, we can't do anything about it. But when we think about our buffering, our ability to be flexible and adaptive, let's nurture and harness the opportunities that our body has for performance. How do you create? I guess my question to you, mate, is, and the thing that fascinates me with your work, when I first got introduced to Matt's work several years ago, was the inquiring approach about how we move and engage with the various demands of our environment or activities. What do you see as really critical in the human condition, in the human body, in people, to be able to navigate their world well?
I think an inquisitive mind is the first thing, because so much of what we determine on, so fitness and performance and all things like that, it's all very subjective, which is again something that I feel that there's a lot of things that we know, but we're not connecting the dots on. And so we need to understand ourselves as an organism is I think predominantly that's one of the sort of foundational things.
Self-awareness.
You need to understand why your body reacts in certain ways and how it reacts, and your brain. And so one of the key things that I think people need to understand, as far as, because you spoke about helping people to navigate. So first thing they need is an inquisitive mind, and they need to understand that they are the driver of this vehicle. Again, I think it's one of these things that we look too much to other people to fix the problems, and that was something that I was not allowed on the farm. We weren't going to call the plumber. Dad was the plumber, and Dad was going to show us how to be the plumber because he had other things to do. And so it was always like, well, we can't just outsource this. You have to do it yourself. If you can learn it, do it, because it's easier to learn it than it is to pay somebody else to come out to the farm and do it for us. And so, so a really good example of understanding the human organism that basically throws everything about the traditional fitness industry out the window is understanding the SAID principle. And so that is SAID, specific adaptations to imposed demands. That is something that we've known about since the 1950s. and it is a widely known of, like people know of its existence in sports science and rehabilitation and things like that, but it doesn't really get any play. It doesn't get much airtime. What that means, so specific adaptations to impose demands, is that your body adapts very specifically to that which you impose upon it. If you don't impose a demand upon your body, it will not get good at it. So a perfect example of that is if you are a long distance runner, that does not mean you are a long distance swimmer. And so our body, the crossover is very minimal, and it's a lot more minimal than people want to sort of realize. And I think, look, I don't know, and I'm not going to go into sort of why I think that might be, that the fitness industry doesn't, even though we know about this, people don't want to talk about it. But it could have something to do with the fact that a lot of gyms are offering people look, if you come and do X, that will help you get better at Y. No, doing Y gets you better at Y. And so, yeah, with a lot of people, if Kelly Slater wants to be a good surfer, he doesn't do that by getting on an exercise bike or a treadmill. He has to surf. There are some other things that he can do along the way to try and help supplement and increase his performance, but ultimately he has to surf. That's not just physical adaptations, that is also neurological adaptations. And it goes back to something you spoke about with the brain training apps in a previous episode, is your brain and body, because it's all the same organism, it adapts to what you ask it to adapt to. And so the reason why that's so important to understand is it basically gives you all the answers that you need. So, well, what do I have to do? What do I have to do to sort of become more well-rounded? Because that's the thing. If you want a general, well-rounded, adaptable physical fitness, you have to do things that are well-rounded, and you have to adapt, and you have to set yourself physical problems. If you want to get better at remembering people's faces and names, you must force yourself to get better at remembering faces and names by remembering faces and names. Memorizing phone numbers is not necessarily going to help you memorize a name or a face. You have to do what you want to get better at. And so that then that opens up another door, which is you have to get very specific about what you want, what you need, and how those correlate. So someone says, I'm just trying to shift these last few kilos. It's like, well, that's a lovely position to be in if all you have to worry about is shifting the last few kilos, because you don't need to lose those last few kilos. That's a personal choice. Like someone who's been told, if you do not lose 20 kilos, you're going to be at risk of XYZ chronic illnesses. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're in a bad position. If you're whinging about a couple of kilos, then it's all good. But that's something that you want. Okay, why? Why do you want that? Why is that last couple of kilos, like, is this really what I need? How does it marry up to what I need? And this is where I think people get a bit off track, is they get sold somebody else's goal. So it's like, well, you need a 6-pack for summer. A 6-pack isn't an indicator of overall health and well-being. It's just a thing. And I can show you photos of prisoners of war with 6-packs, but do you want to be them? Would you like to trade places? And so there's a lot of arbitrary things that we get thrown by sort of this compartmentalized health and fitness industry. Whereas if we just stopped and went, okay, well, what is it that I really need, and what do I want overall? Like, forget about sort of things that I'm being niggled at. What do I really want? Most people want the same thing. They want a good quality of life. They want to remain as young as possible for as long as possible. It's really like, I would challenge you to find me someone that wouldn't say, yes, I would like to tick both those boxes. Mm. We're the same organism. That's the thing, is we like to think that we're so vastly different. We've all got different lived experiences, but a tiger is a tiger, a crocodile is a crocodile, Homo sapien is a Homo sapien. So as much as we like to think that we are vastly different, in a way we are exactly the same.
Summarize those key points there. We need to have, if we're going to start to take our physical performance as a marker of how am I tracking, and if I'm starting to look at myself about where am I at, do I have an awareness of myself around my physical capabilities? Do I have a sense of where am I at? I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and he was telling me that he's now making choices about what he will and won't do because of the physical limitations he's starting to experience. And for him, he's a fairly active 70-year-old gent who has hit many mountain trails. And I was talking about whether he was going to do the Himalayas. Is that something he's going to be doing again? He said, look, my body just wasn't recovering as quickly, so I'm making some decisions about that. So he is demonstrating awareness, but then he's also putting himself in a context to continue to explore how do I fulfill that goal and need. The second step, as you mentioned, was that if we're to have a body that is equipped for life, that enables me to do the things that I want across my lifespan, then I need to have diversity of exposures to different things that are going to enable me to do the tasks that I want
and
to
you
do.
also need to have an understanding of what are the things that I want. So if you said, I have no desire personally to be a ballet dancer, and so it's not something that I need, but it's not something I need, but it's like, okay, I do want to be as mobile as I can be for as long as possible. I want to have the ability to, sort of work, to lift, carry things. I do a lot of, I'm a bush skills instructor, and I want to be able to keep up with my kids and grandkids for as long as I possibly can. And I want to be able to explore. And so to be able to, if someone says, oh, let's go for a bushwalk to, let's hike Mount Warning. Okay, let's hike Mount Warning. Let's do the overland trail in Tasmania. So, okay, we'll do that. And so I think a lot of people need to stop and go, what is it that I actually want? Because they need to get specific on it. And they need to say, okay, well, what is it that I actually want to take with me into my later years? Because it is very hard to get people to stop thinking about what's going to happen in summertime when they go to put on a bikini, and go, just cast your mind a bit further and say, what's going to happen in 20 years? What am I going to be looking to do? Or what do I not want to lose?
What do I want to lose?
What can I afford to lose? What can't I afford to lose? Because if you said to them, okay, well, if you keep going the way you're going, you're probably going to burn yourself out by the time you are in your mid-40s, and you are going to have a body that's riddled with, pain and dysfunction. Would you like to continue down this path? Most people would say no if you can get them to actually stop and say, well, think about where this is going to take you. And think about what you have an understanding of yourself physically, but also have an understanding of the things that you want to be good at and the things that you're not prepared to sacrifice. Because those are the things that you must keep sharp. It's just the same as a knife. If you never sharpen a knife, it'll get dull. You have to keep sharpening your knife, and that will help it to stay sharp for as long as possible. The knife does start to wear down, and it gets thinner and thinner as it gets older, and it does affect the integrity of the knife, but that's an inevitable process. It would be a lot better to have a knife that has been worn down over many years of staying sharp, rather than a knife that looks brand new but you can't do anything with it because it's blunt.
So it really comes down to our goals. One of the things that I remember was a real striking moment when many years ago, pulling together some of the research and the evidence base around where I'm at today, my journey to teach people and obviously share our wonderful conversations with folk about what they can be doing to take control of their health and well-being. Came across a study here in Australia, and I feel this is a very westernized observation of self into the future, but it was a retirement question of those people approaching retirement. What are their primary concerns?
Yeah.
And there were two standout ones. One was fear of losing my independence, and subsequent to that, and as powerful, was fear of losing my memory.
Yeah.
It was in 2017, The Lancet put out a paper which was trying to raise the community's awareness around what could we be doing to prevent memory loss. And it showed very, very clearly through tweaking our risk factors across the lifespan, we could reduce our risk for memory loss by 35%.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that I think are important for our conversation today, depression, midlife depression, was strongly associated with dementia later in life, and also midlife obesity.
Yeah.
And that strikes to what we're eating and also the sedentary nature of our lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's important when we're having this conversation that focal, and I experience this quite a lot, and it will be, well, Dave, I'm fairly active. I vacuum, I do this, I get out in the garden, and I go, that's great. They're engaging activities. But there is an element then that we need to think about, which is physical exercise, which is the go to the gym mentality, or I lift weights, or I do one thing, therefore I will have a better body. Now, a better body and better brain. What appears to be popping out of the literature particularly is the experience of raising our heart rate that we can sustain it for a period of time, aerobic exercise, through to anaerobic exercise where we're in oxygen deprivation state, but we're doing maximal effort for a short period of time. Then there is force, how much stuff that we're moving and lifting. But there's an absence because it sort of still focuses on specific metrics, and I feel it misses the binding of it, the stitching together of how do we create opportunities that tie these things together so that we can then get better transference to life.
Yeah, well, so that's where it'll come back to the SAID principle, but so I'll just try and touch on some of the things like, when we talk about all the different kinds of sort of fitness, and this is where I think, again, the fitness industry has let a lot of people down intentionally or by accident. It doesn't really matter. But by sort of compartmentalizing and sort of living a little bit too much in the athletic, like I shudder whenever I hear people say things like, oh, come to our gym, we'll train you like an athlete. I know from a guy who's played quite a lot of sports at very high level, athletes are not healthy people. Athletes sacrifice health for performance. They are living on a razor's edge where they are tiptoeing between injury and dysfunction, but they're right on that sort of peak performance. That's why like Olympic cycles are 4 years, and it takes something like 3 Olympic cycles to actually get someone up to their top, like up into the 90th percentile of their output. Every time that the Olympics finish, they drop back down to 75 to 80%, because that's where our body wants to be, because it's not designed to be on the edge all the time. The sustainable approach is to think about that 75 to 80, 85% range. And so when we talk about sort of sewing it all together, it's like we do think about things in that back day, chest day, leg day, even from a performance perspective, where it's like, okay, think about your body like a car. So if you putt around in your car at 20 kilometers an hour, then the balls will glaze over, and that's not good for the car. If you drive everywhere at 180 kilometers an hour, that will burn the engine out and wear the parts out, and it will seize up. And so if we don't maintain our vehicle, it will seize up. But so what we need to do is we need to blow the cobwebs out of it every now and again. And so it's good to push the engine, and when you're overtaking and things like that. And so you need to be able to hit the accelerator every now and again, but you also need to be gentle on the engine and be gentle on the components. And so we need to do that with our body, because if you think about, life used to do this for us. There were times where we had to fight for our lives. Like, I'm talking about, thousands of years ago, but even really not that long ago. Like, when you think about, there are, it's still in people's lifetimes, people are still alive today that have seen conflict and times where they had to run for their lives. And I mean, statistically, it's rare, but there are still people in our very safe society here in Australia today who do have to, depending on where they live or depending on if they were just terribly unlucky at a certain point in their life, they've had to fight for their life. There are also people who have had to be very explosive in, even if it's things like you're out camping and you've got to pack things up all of a sudden, and because it starts raining, and so you're like, quick kids, get everything in. And so we need to have the ability to sprint and to do like maximal effort, sort of performance things. So we need our creatine phosphate system that is our like 100-meter sprint or 1 rep max deadlift and things like that. We also need our glycolytic system, which is our 2 to 4 minutes of 85% output. And then we have our oxidative system, which is our, technically while you're drawing breath, you can still keep using your oxidative system. But we need all of them, because if you said to someone who says, oh, I don't like lifting, I don't like lifting heavy things. Okay, what if you need to? Well, I don't. Okay, what if you had a grandchild and your grandchild has goes into anaphylactic shock? You have to get them from the backyard into the house. How do you do that? If that child weighs, 25, 30 kilos, are you confident on your ability to do that? Or if you do that, is your back going to go? In which case, you're no help to your grandchild. You're both down in the backyard, they're dying, and you can't move because your back's out. And so we tend to not realize, and again, if we just stopped and thought about it and went like, what do we want? What do we need? Or what might we need? Yeah, if I have to, again, heaven forbid, like, what if you have to fight off an intruder in your house? Do you have the ability to do that? If you're living in a theoretical world where you go, because I mean, there's one of the things I like to say to people, if you think you might be able to do something, you probably can't. If you've got a pretty good idea that you can do it, means you can, because you've been doing things that are close enough that you do know. You're like, yeah, well, I mean, I can lift, I can throw around, sort of a 40 kilo, 50 kilo dead ball. So yeah, I could pick someone up who was 60 kilos. Yeah, I could do that, because you've done something that's close enough. But if you're like, well, I mean, I've never lifted anything heavy in my life, but I reckon I could give it, I think I might be able to. So, well, that's, if you think you kind of might be able to do something, you probably won't. And so you need to start to ask those things. And because of the SAID principle, we know that if you do want to be strong enough to say, yeah, pick up the grandkids and carry the grandkids around, you need to be doing things that are mimicking picking up the grandkids and carrying them around. If you want to know that you could go for a walk up, go for a hike, it's like, well, you need to be doing things that are either hiking or something that is very close to it.
I think it's worth to, we could bring this into, what does this translate to our cognitive fitness? Because, folk are listening to the show around, I'm concerned about memory loss, or I want to be proactive to maintain my cognitive fitness, or I'm looking at, I want to maximize my peak cognitive capacities, and they're here listening to the show through the various interviews that we've had to get a sense now that there are multiple things pivoting around it. And my last show that I had with Dr. Tom Gwillems spoke about the understanding that what we do translates to signals.
Yes.
Signals at a cellular level. And when it comes to challenging, exertive, be it forceful or taxing because it's requiring your effort over a prolonged period of time and raising your heart rate, we are seeing positive changes at the base level of our biology being around the cell. And when it comes to our brain, one of the lovely things that I guess, and this is probably where a lot of the commentary comes around how exercise is neuroprotective, or the linking that association, is because in animal and also human studies, we're seeing these changes around neurogenesis. So our neurons are adapting and growing. Synaptogenesis, the connections those neurons have with each other are becoming more prolific, or they're pairing back to be more specific. There is angiogenesis, so greater blood supply. One of the lovely things I remember being exposed to some years ago was around that neurons, particularly in some of the areas that were responsible for memory, like our hippocampus area. Yeah. We've got a garden bed of neurons that are wanting to grow. Yeah. And when they even looked at folks in their 90 plus years, when they've looked at folks that have given their bodies to science, said, yep, have a look at my brains, I'm keen to hand that over to you. They've had a look under the hood and they've seen these beautiful brains and these neurons wanting to grow. Yeah. However, the key thing about what is dense versus what is weaker or thinner in that memory region or key memory area of our brain is the blood supply, the angiogenesis, the blood supply to that area. And therefore, if we don't have enough blood supply in that area, there are fewer, it is weaker. So exercise affords this opportunity. I guess, how do we craft up simply on a day-to-day basis to start creating these opportunities for ourselves? You know, I spoke recently to a retirement community and I asked them, I said, look, do you have a walking group? And there were lots of hands raised up about the walking group, and I was really encouraged by that. I said, what do you do? Tell me about the walking group. And they said, well, we just go around the same path each week. Yeah. And there'll be a set sort of pace. There'll be a conversational element. Yep. No one's particularly being pushed or challenged. Yeah. And so there was an opportunity there to say, well, how can you leverage this time much better?
Yeah, well, so, because as you pointed out, it comes down to signals and it comes down to the imposed demands. If you don't signal, or if you don't create the signal by imposing a demand, then you just don't get the signal. It's as easy as that. And so because again, we sort of, if we sort of separate it up too much, we get a little bit lost. But the whole purpose, there's a fascinating TED talk out there if anyone is interested, Why We Have Brains by Dr. Daniel Wolpert. It's an absolutely sort of fascinating look into the whole purpose of a brain. What the organisms that have brains, why do they have them? Movement is the reason for brains to exist. Brains don't exist in organisms that don't, not just movement, but complex and adaptive movement. And this is kind of where is one of my bugaboos when people talk about, I guess, exercise boosting brain activity and things like that, where you go, what type of exercise?
Wow, a lot of stuff in this episode. Be right back into it. I want to share with you a little bit about memoryhealthmadeeasy.com and what you can find over there. Programs, resources, and community, all with one goal: to help stop avoidable memory loss. Here's a great place to start. The Memory Health Checkup shows you how to identify your personal risks and also set a map and course about what to do about them. The Memory Health Fast Masterclass gets you out of the gates quickly around applying the 9 principles for Memory Health for Life. Want to work out your brain? Improve your brain performance with How to Train Your Brain. It's a 30-day brain optimizing program. And of course, we've got our flagship community, which is all about support, and you can ask me any question, where I'm your memory health coach to guide, support, and cheer you through the steps to achieve memory health. Come on over to memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products where you can find out more. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, so in regards to how do we leverage the movement opportunities that we have, and the audience that sort of comes to mind are those folks that are in that, it can be any, but let's just take that example around that retirement community of their daily walk, and they've got an opportunity, but we do the same plain vanilla stuff.
Yeah.
And yet we're missing an opportunity.
Yeah. So, because that's when people talk about like exercise boosting hippocampus development, for example, hippocampal development, the question is almost always glossed over. What kind of exercise? The thing is, the whole purpose of our brain is to perform complex and adaptive movements. So if the movements aren't complex and they're not adaptive, then we're not maximizing that neurological engagement. And so if you're going for a walk, because one of the things that the hippocampus, one of the roles that the hippocampus plays is navigational abilities. And so if you're going for a walk, the same path every day, and it's just very vanilla, straightforward, there's no kind of challenge placed upon that, then your body's going to get used to that very quickly. And so is your brain, because it's a known path. You're not adapting anymore. It's not complex, it's not adaptive. If you can alter that walk so that even if you just go on a different path, you are already boosting the engagement of the hippocampus. And so if you can then make it just a little bit more challenging, then you're getting more. It's just always about trying to squeeze the juice. And you've just got an orange, and it's like, well, if I just give it one squeeze, I'll get a little bit out. But if I just keep squeezing every bit of it out that I can, then I'm going to get the most benefit out. And so
that's a really big challenge, I think, from some folk who have come from a non-health, non-movement world to have an appreciation of how do I squeeze. There's a wonderful marketing book years ago that I came across my desk. It was called Hey Whipple, Squeeze This. And it was very much around how do we squeeze the opportunity out of...
And so, because what we kind of need to understand is, as an organism, life used to do that for us. My childhood on the farm did that for me. And so I didn't have to find ways to squeeze. Life did that. I was just doing. I was just sort of getting up every morning and doing. And so when you look at people so say, for example, when we talk about things like the blue zone, and when we talk about like hunter-gatherer populations, there was a really, really good study done not that long ago on hunter-gatherer populations as models for public health. And so because we look at them and we say, okay, well, they have almost non-existent rates of cancer, heart disease. They have no obesity, they don't have obesity. They don't have diabetes. They also don't suffer from depression and anxiety. And if they make it through childhood, because there's very high mortality rates in childhood, but if they make it through childhood, their life expectancy approaches ours. And so they are incredibly healthy people, same as the blue zone. They don't work out. Like in the blue zone, they don't go to the gym. In hunter-gatherer populations, they don't go to the gym. They get their physical activity and their variety because we know this with food. We know that you need to eat a varied diet with your food, but we don't understand it's exactly the same for our brain. We have to have a varied movement diet as well in order for it to get as many different nutrients from as many different sources. And so, in the blue zones, for so many years, it was just they focused on what they eat. But so then they started to realize it was also the social connectedness but also the physical activity. And so in those, like, you know, in a hunter-gatherer situation, for example, you are going to have to know how to chase something down. Like, there are going to be very intense bursts of exercise.
But not only that, that person is planning it out. They've got a strategy.
Yes.
They've got to figure out their terrain. They're thinking about their own sense
Yeah.
of capability to do the
Yeah.
task. They're coordinating
There's
others around
so
it.
many variables that is hitting so many trigger points in the brain. And so if we are to then go, okay, well, how do we, as not hunter-gatherers, how do we try to squeeze a bit more out? I think gamifying and play-based stuff is phenomenal. Everyone loves playing games. It does seem, though, the longer it has been since we have played games, the less in practice we are.
There's resistance, isn't
There
there?
is.
There is resistance. When we're asked to play, we have to cut through some of our social constraints, our behavioural constraints that have been, you know, acquired through our life.
Oh, yeah, through a variety of sources,
Yeah.
but also from, and this is one of the big things, again, something that I do blame largely on the fitness industry, the modern fitness industry. We are conditioned to believe that exercise is a penance. It's a punishment. And so you don't move because, like, if you said to someone who doesn't like going to the gym, if you said, okay, you have a choice. So tomorrow morning, you can either wake up and go to the gym or you can wake up completely paralyzed. Which would you prefer? They would say, of course I'll go to the gym, because having all of their movement capacity taken away from them would be world ending. And so it's one of those things where we should move because we have the ability to do it. We have a vehicle and a vessel that can carry us around, so we should. Movement is, and so for me, it bothers me when we just talk about, and that's kind of why I tend to prefer the word movement as opposed to exercise, because exercise has that negative connotation. But everything is movement. Writing a letter to someone is movement. Walking to the letterbox to post it in is movement. Smiling is a movement. All of our circulatory system and respiratory system, it all needs movement. Movement is the only way that you can affect the world around you. Nothing exists if not for movement. Nothing can be created, nothing can be destroyed apart from through movement. And so we need to start to understand that it is, because that is one of the reasons why I think people are resistant to play-based stuff, is because they feel that unless they're being punished, they're not working hard enough. Because we have all these like garbage platitudes, like no pain, no gain. What does it even mean? Like, I understand the concept behind it. Like, you must go through struggle to get gain. But in and of itself, it's nonsense. No pain, all that really means is no pain. Like, no pain, no pain.
I think
Pain doesn't equal gain.
Yeah, and I see the link to exertion.
Yes.
That when somebody is exerting, it can be in those early phases quite anxiety provoking, that something could bad happen to me.
Yeah.
And coming from a movement base, an activity base of not much,
Yeah.
into starting to move, there's a whole host of changes that happen in the body that can be quite alienating and confronting.
Well, and that need to be, because that's because really when you break it down, the way that makes sense is to go, well, it is through discomfort and struggle and sometimes
resistance.
pain, because we have to put our body under stresses in order to signal the changes. Because if we don't ever push the limits, then our body will never set new limits.
But I think you've hit the nail on the head about stresses, that the stress isn't of a magnitude that it causes
and so then
harm.
it becomes about purpose and application rather than just no pain, no gain. Therefore, pain equals gain. Therefore, more pain equals gain,
Better gains.
better gains.
Greater
And
gains.
so, well, it's like people aren't understanding the organism they are. And so there is also this flagellation sort of, hard work breeds results, and
Suffering.
smart work breeds results. Hard work can breed like injury, and hard work can breed a shoulder reconstruction. And so if we sort of that's one of the big things, and that's one of the big, I guess, hurdles that I have for my clients is I do have people who are almost addicted to struggle and intensity, but they're not doing it in a smart way. Because if you did understand, if you were honoring your organism that you are, and you were understanding why we need to go through the struggle, that would inform the type of struggle and the dosage and the application. It would also, it would be able, you could then say, okay, well, yeah, my body's also my body's not feeling it today. Like, I'm very run down. You know what? I'm going to be a little bit more sustainable
Forgiving.
in a little bit more forgiving. And so I'm going to work with my body rather than against it. And so I think if we can start to get people to understand that exercise isn't a punishment, intensity is very beneficial, but again, dosage is the key of everything. Like, if all you do is long distance running, then you're overdosing on long distance running. You're not doing any lifting, you're not doing any carrying. If all you ever do is just like back day, leg day, chest day kind of stuff, and you're not engaging the brain and doing any kind of physical problem solving, if you're not moving yourself out of your comfort zone, but you always have to try to shift the goalposts, because that, with the SAID principle, the specific adaptations to impose demands, once your body will adapt to the demands you impose upon it. So if you want to be adaptable, if you want to be resourceful and resilient, and you want your body to be able to deal with what life throws at it, you have to shift the goalposts. And the good thing about that is it keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it's two birds with one stone.
Yeah. The thing that I'll often talk to folk about is that when we're wanting to get a change cognitively, when we're wanting to target that, let's take somebody who's just survived a stroke and they come and see me and they want to be able to perform certain tasks, which has a lot of cognitive type demands on that person. Well, that person, when I see them, I'm going to ask them, I want you to be in the level of challenge of around 6 to 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Now, that 6 to 8 out of 10 on day one is going to be very different to 6 to 8 out of 10 at day 30.
Yes.
So we need to then make sure that we are on that stepwise ladder, or, that's a fairly structural way of thinking about it. It makes it easy, though, to grasp that once things become less than that range, we need to change the dosage or the stimuli or the novelty or the thing to create the 6 to 8 out of 10.
And also, when they reach a point, all things willing, through where old man time starts to take from them that which they had, then it's still, you want to go your 6 to 8 out of 10. It has to be subjective, and people have to understand, it goes back to what I said before, they are the driver of this vehicle. And so I think people, empowering people is important, to sort of say, look, it's your body, it's your car, you drive it. Don't let me tell you where to go. But it only has to be incremental, and so when we do go into talking about the hunter-gatherers, for example, so there is this myth that hunter-gatherers must have outworked us tenfold. The average person who goes to the gym and does high intensity interval training and CrossFit and stuff like that, they burn more calories in a day than a hunter-gatherer does. What matters is the hunter-gatherer burns their calories over the course of a day. Many different ways, getting a lot of different stimuli, whole range of tasks. The CrossFitter goes and burns all of theirs in trying to essentially outdo inactivity through intensity. And so that then brings about, because they're getting the dosage wrong, they're getting too much intensity. So that brings about burnout injuries, shoulder, like rotator cuff tears, spinal injuries, arthritis, early onset osteoarthritis. And so brings about a whole bunch of other things that the hunter-gatherer doesn't deal with because they're spreading it out. And so...
Well, I think you could even just cast that lens even in 50 years.
Yes.
Of how work has changed here in Australia.
Yes. Yes.
We've had, where I remember seeing the ABS stats in 1905 that demonstrated that when they're looking at the structure of the industries, 19% of the Australian population at that time was working within agriculture.
Yes.
Today, that is 1%.
Yes.
So,
and even like trade versus office admin kind of, like, it's very much becoming that we are not getting the, because again, if you get a guy who's a chippy,
yeah,
he's probably going to be in pretty good physical shape and he's also going to, he's people who have physical, active and engaging jobs where they have to solve problems all day generally are dealing with better memory health as well, rather than people who have mundane, repetitive jobs where they just see the same challenges every day, because your body gets used to it. Even if it's a terribly difficult challenge, if that is your only challenge, your body gets used to it, and so then it becomes, you're not getting the benefit out of it. You have to change the goalposts.
There's a term that was put out several years ago, and I've adapted it nowadays to reflect that I think there is such urgency around the movement diversity across the day, that my question that I have in my mind is, are we in a zone now of sedentary dementia syndrome, meaning that our behaviors nowadays are lining us up for greater and greater risk for experiencing
I think that is 100% what's going on.
So then, Matt, let's say I've been an office worker. I am an office worker.
Yeah.
I'm behind the desk all day. And I'm going to hit you with a couple of different examples that we could maybe just shine a torch on for folk that are listening on taking action in this space.
Yes.
If I've been sedentary and maybe I had some aptitude for movement and sport as a younger person, but now that I'm fulfilling my life responsibilities either in my 20s through to 40s, where do people start? How do they start to make better, how do they take the steps now, and what would you encourage them to consider? Obviously, we've given them a formula. Raise your awareness about your movement. Think about the demands that you're exposing yourself. Diversity is key. Think about that it's across the day, not just these spikes.
Not just for 1 hour at night, 2 days a week.
I think I mentioned to you that I use the tomato clock, and it's great. I put it on my desktop, and it's a tomato.
Yeah.
And I hit the tomato, click the tomato. I'm not clicking a clock, guys. I'm clicking a tomato, and I've set the timer for 25 minutes. Yeah. And then it just pops up, it's tomato time. And I think it just cuts through a little bit for me on, right, I need to change. I changed my
that's
position.
The thing is, because again, we have to understand that this is our reality for a lot of people now, is that they're not hunter-gatherers. They're not farmers. They're not, and so you have to then accept that and go, okay, well, how am I going to get as close to mimicking that as possible? And so one of the things I do recommend to people is getting an app where they can set a timer so that every 20 minutes, every half hour, it can be up to them. It can be every hour. It doesn't matter. Because you'll start slow. This is the big thing that people need to understand, is you have to be kind to yourself and you have to drip feed this stuff. If you just try to go, you know what, I'm going to shift my whole paradigm and I am going to have a stand-up desk and this and that and this and that and all of these things, and you completely uproot your comfort zone, your body will resist. Because again, if you understand the organism that we are, there are reasons that we don't like change. There are reasons we are resistant to it, because it used to be far more drastic than what it is now. And so we're designed, while we need change, we've got this dichotomy where we are a creature of paradoxes. And so that is one of them, that we need change and we need variety. But because life used to throw so much at us, we used to have to actively try to avoid it. But we had no choice. We were going to have to adapt, and there was going to be catastrophic changes in our life. But because of that, we've evolved to be very resistant to change, because we had to hold on to that which we knew desperately, because life was so turbulent. But so now we have to bring change in, and we have to do things and understand that we are resistant to it. So just set a timer, and all you have to do is get up and stretch. Like everyone enjoys, like if you can take someone, if you can snap them out of the routine of, I'm sitting in front of a computer, I've got to get this report done, and standing up for 15 seconds and having a stretch is not going to stop you from getting the report done. If anything, again, as you can back up, the research shows that by shifting your focus, it stops you from getting, like, it pulls you out of that tunnel vision sort of, just that sort of autopilot mode. You go, boom, you can come back into it with a refreshed set of eyes, and away you go. 15 seconds is all you need. And then eventually your body will start to, like, once you get comfortable with that, you will start to find that you'll maybe go, you know what, like, maybe I'll just start, I'll stand up in between timers. So maybe I sit down for 20 minutes, and then I have a stand up for 20 minutes, and I sit down for 20 minutes. And so again, it comes back to that, just always shifting and being playful with it. Think about a new demand that you can layer on. There's a really fun game that I play when I'm running. So I work for a company called MoveNat doing their certification events. And there's a little game that I like to play with people to show them what demands do to a skill. And so we start out by walking, and we just walk around in a circle. Everyone's generally pretty, across that one. And so I say, okay, like, now let's pick up the pace. So we're still walking, we're not running, but so we're not allowed to do anything other than walk. Walking is a bipedal gait. And so we can't run, and we can't put our hands down on the floor. And so I'll say, okay, so pick up the pace. Okay, is it more difficult? And it is, just very slightly. So you go, okay, now I want you to just cut across the circle. And so you're going to cut across the circle, and then once you get to the other side, you're just going to cut back across. And so you're just going to keep, so I want you to stay like walking quickly, but now you're walking. So it's like that intersection, was it Adelaide Street and Edward in the city? Either way, but it's that, when you have like everyone come from all four corners just crossing the road.
I've got a picture of that sort of Tokyo intersection.
Yes, exactly.
The New York Times Square.
Exactly. Yeah. And so everyone's crossing, and as soon as you get to the other side of the circle, you turn and you go again. And so now, like, it's slightly more difficult. It's still walking, but it's slightly more difficult, because now you have to worry about aligning yourself. You have to worry about spatial awareness, keeping your mind on people around you. So then I go, okay, I get 2 dowels and hold them out. So like my wingspan's, close enough to 2 meters as is. And so then, I'm now the new ceiling. So I move around, and they have to stay underneath the level of the dowels. Again, it's just walking, but now they're crouching down. It's starting to get pretty difficult. And so then you say, okay, well, now I lower it again. Okay. And so you only have to do it for about 2 minutes, and their legs are burning and they're sweating, and everyone's had a good time. Everyone's laughing. Everyone's having fun. But I do it to show them that all they did was go for a walk. But if you think about not only the like the range of motion that they have gone through and the different muscles that they have engaged, but also the neurological engagement. So it's been something where they have had to adapt to new demands that are being thrown at them, and they have to they have to adapt to those demands on the spot. Then they also have to dodge other people, and they have to be constantly scanning to make sure they're not going to run into each other, and all these sorts of things. It's just a walk, but by just sprinkling extra demands on. So you talk about the nursing home walking group. All they have to do is go, okay, well, we'll change the route. That is one demand. And so they go, okay, well, we'll change the route so that we're going somewhere where we might actually have to, like, maybe climb over some things or go under some branches. That's more demand. Then you go, okay, well, maybe we're going to, and because it sounds corny, but everyone enjoys it, if you did some form of treasure hunt. And like, because people do, like, they tend to be a little bit, it's almost like we feel that we have no right to have fun or to play. Or even if it wasn't a treasure hunt, even if they said, okay, what we're going to do is, like, we're going to go to a park and we're going to play tag. And, you know, it's only stupid if you're the only person doing it. If it's a group of people doing it, that's when people say they feel weird.
Then it becomes normal.
Exactly. So if one person walks past a group of, 15 older people playing tag in a park, that one person is the odd one out. The 15 who are doing it, so it's no longer weird because you're in a group. And so, but things like that. And that's why, I mean, kids are great. I like to sort of, when people say, like, oh, how do I get more active with my kids? It's like the kids will tell you how to do it. You just have to go out and be with them. They will take care of the variety. They'll take care of that kind of stuff, and you'll pick it up as you go. Because being playful is a skill that we are born with, that we lose. You don't have to teach a kid, like, you don't have to teach toddlers to play hide and seek. That's ingrained within them. There are certain games that we understand through, like, our DNA. It's wired into us. And so, yeah, I think just by trying to be a little bit more and gamifying it. So if you let something get boring, you've done the wrong thing. If it's getting boring, change it, shift it, alter it, do something different. Yeah, do something different and sort of go, okay, well, yeah, gonna have to, like, I've got my 20-minute timer. I do that. Okay, well, now I'm going to, when I get up every 20 minutes, I'll grab a stress ball. And so I'll, like, do some grip strength stuff while I'm stretching, or, now I'm going to actually go and I'm going to do something in the office. Like, I'm going to actually get up and leave my desk. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Matt, the things that we've spoken about today around awareness, create unique and novel demands, and continually have that inquiring mind about that. Have a clear goal about what you want to achieve and what does that look like?
Really actually try and be brutally honest with yourself about that goal, because a lot of people, that's their drama with goal setting, is they're not actually really brutally honest, nor are they sort of practical and realistic.
And that can be hard when you're doing it solo.
Yeah, very hard.
Maybe there's something there around opening up a conversation with another person,
a
trusted person, but maybe that's the opportunity to say, hey, I'm doing this. This is, I think, really important for me. This is my goal, but I just really want to, I'm making a statement about myself and my intent. And obviously, at the time of this recording, it's in December of 2019. We're leading into the silly season, but that's also the time where people start to dust off what's my vision for next year. How do I want that to be? We've spoken about movement poverty, and that we've got these spikes of opportunities that people are doing today in their routines, but we're trying to nudge us to think more around frequency throughout the day.
Yeah. Or even frequency throughout the week. So, for example, if you destroy yourself at the gym 3 nights a week, you're destroying yourself at the gym 3 nights a week. If you can ease that back and maybe go and do something, each day, then it's the overall frequency, it's the consistency that's the key. And if you're doing something that doesn't allow you frequency and consistency, then you might need to have a look at what it is that you're doing. If you do something that makes you that sore every time you do it, that it takes you 4 days to get over it, you need to seriously look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, you need to be moving in a way, but also if you can easily do it 7 days a week and not break a sweat, you need to look at what you're doing. But so yeah, consistency is king.
And we've touched on the zone where we're wanting people to cast their lens at, which is around that 6 to 8 out of 10 level of challenge, effort, uniqueness, and that wraps up those sort of drivers for neuroplasticity or brain change and also body change. We've also highlighted that, you know, in the context of biology, in the context of evolution, that the human structure, the human organism is designed to engage in the world. And we then, you know, talked about some examples around hunter-gatherers, the blue zones, and to touch on that too, there's multiple things that they're doing that appear to be associated with their longevity.
Yeah,
and
you
health.
can't compartmentalize one thing. It's the interconnectedness between it all. That's what they're doing well. And that's what we have a hard time focusing on. We want to break it down because the nutritionist that looks at the blue zone goes, well, see, diet is no, it's everything. It's everything. And so, but really what they're doing is they're just, their life gives them because we spoke about like the world in which our organism evolved. When you look at blue zones and hunter-gatherers and these people that we look to for models of health, they're the ones who are most closely resembling that lifestyle. And I don't want to go and live in a cave. You know, I don't want to go and live, you know, with the, you know, where my child might die from a very, very preventable disease. But we should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, just because we are sort of modern and, you know, quote unquote civilized and developed human beings doesn't mean that we're genetically any different to, like, Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years. And so we are genetically the same as what we were 300,000 years ago. Our life is drastically different for most people than what it was, but we are still the same organism. So we need to understand that we have to, we're conveniencing ourselves to death. And it's that sedentary dementia that you're talking about. If we don't understand that our organism has evolved in a very turbulent system, and we understand how it works and why it works the way it works, then if we don't understand that, then we're just going to keep going down the path that we're going down. We have to start trying to sort of mimic those activities. And we are designed to be very physically formidable. This is one of the things that again annoys me, is we have this idea that humans are like this soft, squishy, like, you know, like as if we've fluked our role at the top of the food chain. But we are a formidable creature. And when you see, again, hunter-gatherers and people who have really sort of lived in a way that has developed that organism the way it's meant to be developed, they are very formidable creatures physically, but also they have the ability to, you know, navigate and track animals and all of these things that we sort of feel are superhuman abilities, but it's just standard for them. And so we are an incredible animal. It's kind of like we just need to start realizing that and respecting it a little bit more, because we are meant to be very formidable for a very long time.
I think that's a wonderful point to close on, mate.
Yeah.
In our conversation about being formidable for life.
Yeah, being formidable for life. Like it's one of those things where we weren't, this idea of decrepitude doesn't really kick in. Like you've still got, like old women in Greece. There's a guy that I know, his grandmother, she was 108 when she died, but right up until the last 2 years of her life, she was still climbing up the mountain every day to cut down branches to come and give to the goats. And so she would cut the branches so the goats could eat the leaves, and she would climb up there, and then she would walk down and she would carry all of it. And yeah, we don't give ourselves enough credit for being the incredibly formidable creature that we are. So yeah, probably good point to end on.
Matt, thanks mate for your time today on the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. We've covered a lot of territory around how we can create a lot more diversity, a lot more function, a lot more goal-orientated movement with an outcome to try and safeguard our cognitive fitness for life, to be formidable throughout life, and that we've got very dense, compressed years at the back end of our life where we feel the changes associated with aging and or changes in our health due to the mortality of our lives. But we've got a ton of opportunity in front of us, and you've really highlighted, I think, so many spaces, but also a model to walk us through on what we start to need to pay attention for to achieve that goal. Formidable for life.
Quite simply, do what you want to get better at. Do the things that you want to do for life. The only way you're going to get better at them is to do them. And yeah, you have to start really sort of, like, it's never too late to start. Things are only going to get worse, so they're only going to magnify if you do nothing about them. And so when people do say, oh, I'm worried about my memory health, I'm worried about my physical health, I'm worried that I'm not very physically formidable, well then go out and squeeze as much as you can from the orange, because it's only too late when you're dead. There will be certain things that a 95-year-old is not going to be doing parkour, but a 95-year-old can still make themselves a more formidable version of themselves than what they would have been if they had continued on the trajectory they were on. The only way to actually start to seize it back is to physically grab it and drag it back a little bit at a time, and be patient. That's my parting bit of advice to the audience, and it's my advice to my clients. If it has taken you 45 years to get to where you aren't going to flip that around in a matter of weeks or months. It's a process. It's going to take years, and you will never be the person you were in your 20s. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing. But be patient with your body, work with it rather than against it. So as you sort of go forward, particularly again with things that can be very frustrating, like memory health, just be confident in the fact that doing your bit to seize it back is really all you can do. If you do nothing, if you put your head in the sand, it will only magnify and get worse.
Mate, there's a lovely statement that I've come across, which is there's no magic bullet, but there's a magic process.
Yes. Yeah.
And we've highlighted that magic process to be a formidable human for life, to stop movement poverty, to cut through that sort of sedentary dementia syndrome that really is an amplifying of sedentary, lack of novelty, lack of diversity, lack of goal-orientated stuff that challenges us, is something that's going to be a real threat to our cognitive fitness for life. Yeah. Matt, how can people stay in touch with you? How can they find more about your work? How can they come along to experience some work with Matt?
Yeah. So I have a facility in Nunda for anyone in Brisbane. I also do run events for a company called MoveNat. So on Facebook, Stage 6 Health and Fitness. You can get a hold of us there. On Instagram, just at Stage 6 Fitness. Our website is stage6fitness.com.au. And yeah, if they want to check out any of the other MoveNat stuff, I'm the guy in Australia and surrounds that runs those events. But yeah, anyone's more than welcome to touch base, even sort of, because we post up a lot of the stuff that we do on social media, and a lot of it we have a lot of people that follow us just to get some ideas on how to play games, and they get ideas on, because we do a whole range of things from kids through to elderly. We do NDIS. I've worked with sporting teams and professional and Olympic athletes, but it's always through that sort of like play-based adaptability, working on efficiency. And so yeah, a lot of people just follow us on social media just to sort of like spark some creativity and get some ideas. But yeah, and if anyone has any questions, then yeah, I'm reachable or contactable through the social media avenues, as are most people these days.
Matt, thanks so much, and I can certainly attest to that the Facebook camera work of your lovely wife and others there give great stimulation on these short, pithy videos that show exciting, novel, different ways that might just be the spark for wherever you're at or within the group that you're with, that you can just sprinkle a little bit of new ingredients, new stuff into your work. Matt, thanks so much for your time today.
No worries at all. Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a conversation today, guys. Thank you very much for joining me on the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. We covered a lot of territory today about how your brain can change through the power of neurogenesis, and how you can leverage movement and mental exercises to squeeze as much out of the exercises as you can for your brain health benefits, for your memory health. We've touched on those things around awareness of your body as being a key statement here, diversity in putting unique and challenging demands on the body, which is stressful, but not in a way which is designed to harm or hinder your development. We discussed about how goals are super important, about why we're doing it, and therefore what exercise, what things do we challenge ourselves to in order to achieve those goals. We've discussed some ways about how we can prompt our behavior changes of increasing movement frequency. We discussed as well about the phenomena of movement poverty and a term that I've put out there, which is, are we suffering from sedentary dementia syndrome, lacking that movement diversity and complexity, which is helping challenge our brain to adapt, change and grow. The brain benefits of physical exercise are pretty clear. There's neurogenesis, being how our neurons can adapt and grow. There is also the conditions around synaptogenesis, about how those neurons connect with other ones and make that a rich network and clear and robust network. We spoke about also the benefit of exercise and how it improves angiogenesis, blood supply. So making sure your neurons, your cells are getting all that lovely, rich, nutrient-rich blood. Guys, the movement opportunities are in front of us, and creating a formidable life is, I guess, a goal for me, and no doubt possibly for yourself as well. I'd love to hear how you go with applying this in your life. And of course, if you're after a simple checklist to get started with some of these activities in your life, then go to the memoryhealthmadeeasy.com and you can grab our 9 factors for memory health for life, of which, of course, movement and exercise is one of those key pillars. It's a great place to start, particularly if you're pulling out, I guess, a strategy or a compass about how to navigate your way through this to improve your memory health for life, to have a formidable life. Anyway, I've greatly enjoyed our conversation today with Matt. I hope you have too. And I look forward to hearing from you and how you're applying this in your life. I'm Dave Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. Thank you for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.
The purpose of Memory Health Made Easy podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a doctor or qualified professional. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or personal professional advice or services. Instead, we would encourage you to discuss your options with a healthcare provider who specializes in your particular needs.